throwing spaghetti in the wall and expecting it to stick. It's not going to stick, and it's going to make a mess. This type of stuff is, in a sense, messy, but I think with the right amount of time and effort, we can kind of sort through this, and we're going to separate the wheat from the chaff, and maybe find diamonds in the middle of this separation. And so that's the point here, is we're just going to be taking things piece by piece and see how things go. But the moral of the story right here is that obsessive compulsive disorder is not just one specific type of obsession, but there's many different facets of it, many different dimensions. And so I am looking at, in this particular case, contamination-based obsessive compulsive disorder. The definition of contamination obsessive compulsive disorder is it's an OCD dimension in which the person obsesses over contacting an illness and spreading germs, and these intrusive thoughts cause the person serious anxiety and stress, which they try to relieve with compulsive behavior like excessive washing or crowded spaces. So this is the definition, and according to these researchers' estimate, Broderick and McKay and Rasmussen and others, 55% of the overall OCD population has COCD, or contamination-based OCD. And so looking at the numbers here, 1.2% of Americans are diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder. Out of those 1.2%, 55%, in the range of 25 to 55%, have COCD, contamination-based obsessive compulsive disorder. So that's about 0.65% of the population. Not a very large, but it's a meaningful amount of people, and I really think that there is this connection with COVID-19, and it can grow, but this is more speculation. We'll get into this a little bit later in discussion. And so right now, what I would like to do is really just sort of connect this with disgust, because it's very interconnected with this particular term. Contamination-based OCD has this relationship where they are triggered. Their compulsions, their obsessions first are triggered by a disgust-based stimuli, a signal. So let's say they see a dirty toilet, or maybe some sunflower seeds on the ground, something that's maybe to a certain degree messy. It incites a signal, and it incites these obsessive behaviors, and then these obsessive sort of thoughts about dirtiness and contamination leads them to these compulsions. And what we see here is it's an anxiety-based disorder, but it's not fear. According to the research that I've looked at, it's not fear that is inciting this obsessive compulsive contamination dimensionality disorder, but it's disgust. When we look at the data, we look at the research, when an obsessive compulsive disorder person with the dimensionality contamination, when they see something fear-based, they process it almost identical with somebody. There's no statistical difference between a person that does not have a disorder, somebody that's normal and normally functioning person that sees something that's fear inciting, such as maybe a spider or a lion or something like that, something that causes a lot of fear. They process fear the same as somebody with COCD does. But when it's something disgusting, like a dirty toilet, they process it differently. And we're going to go into how the COCD person processes these things differently. But it's disgust that incites this COCD, not fear. What is disgust? What kind of disgust are we looking at? Well, here's the definition based on Rosen and colleagues. And this is a feeling of revulsion when exposed to an aversive stimuli. This feeling motivates the active or inactive withdrawal from the source of revulsion. And what type of stimuli are we looking at? It's a pathogen-based disgust. That's what we're looking at. It's a pathogen-based disgust. Now, you might ask, well, are we talking about disgust when it comes to seeing or maybe having a kiss from grandma, for example? Maybe grandma gives you a kiss. Are you saying that type of disgust? No, I'm not looking at that type of disgust. I mean, yeah, for some people that would be kind of disgusting or whatever. It's like, ew, 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 getting grandma kisses. Not something that I particularly would want to do right now, is get a kiss from grandma. A lot of children, at least when I was growing up as a child, I didn't want to get kisses from grandma. But anyway, the disgust I'm talking about is more of a visceral type of disgust based on human evolution, whatever was going to cause us disease or sickness. That type of disgust is what we're going to be looking at, rather than this is more of a moral element of disgust, getting a kiss from grandma. But nevertheless, the dimensionality or the function of this mechanism works the same way for moral, social, or in our case, contamination-based pathogen disgust. And so how does this work? They have to recognize what kind of threat it is. And so when you are at the office, working at the office, and you're exposed to a stimuli, right? So you have this stimuli that is right next to your desk, and it's a foul odor of some sort. Your body has to recognize this threat. Is it external threat or an internal threat? If it's an external threat, like a tiger, lion, or bear, oh my, right? If it's one of these things, then your fear-based mechanism will activate. And this is according to Garcia and colleagues, and Tolan and colleagues. This is according to their research and theory. Once we recognize it as a disgust-based internal threat, our brain has a time-tested mechanism. It's old and redundant, so it has to process this stimuli, this internal threat stimuli of germs or disease or whatever, and it goes through this process, and once everything is accounted for and it reaches this threshold, the light flash bulb or the flashlight turns on. In this case, the flash bulb turns on, and you get this disgust response. Flash bulb turns on, you get this disgust response, and your behavioral immune system, that means your behaviors that push you or motivate you to avoid the situation or mitigate the threat in some way, the internal threat in some way, by washing your hands or using hand sanitizer or wearing a face mask, comes into play. So this is the process that happens once it turns on. You have this activity right here, and for normal functioning people, maybe we just use a little bit of hand sanitizer and we go about our day. With somebody with contamination-based OCD, they're obsessively thinking about this, like over and over again, this intrusive thoughts of grandma kisses, ill, 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 need to clean, need to clean, need to clean. These sessions have a heavy weight on this person until actions are done to relieve this heavy weight. So it's this disgust anxiety drives a person to do these repetitive actions, washing hands for a certain amount of time. Perhaps it's a sanitation ritual. Maybe you do hand sanitizer, then you use soap and water, wash your hands, and you take a shower, hand sanitizer, soap and water, wash your hands, take a shower. And this may go over and over again. You maybe have